Conditions where the water's super clear and it's hard, I've come down to the bottom of the system to get a little bit more tidal flow, and this beast has jumped on it. I'm going to see if I can, I'll try and measure it and show you how big she is. Give you a look. It's up over that 600. Let's have a look. How big are you, girl? High 70s, it's probably 76, 77, somewhere around that. Oh man, love this. Look at the way they monster these big lures. Oh. But there's some crackers coming from Australian designers, especially when they're custom made, and these beauties, you can get David to make it up, whether it's, you know, a slow floating suspending or slow sinking glide baits and swim baits, and GK will do the finish for you. So these are exactly the way that I wanted them, which means I'm going to fish them a lot more, and they've got a profile, this big bullish profile like nothing else that I've seen recently, so certainly going to give these a little bit more time on the water. Welcome back to another My Lure Box video. In today's video I'm going to take you through a review of these swim baits that have been custom made. These are a custom designed big bait that I think is going to be very exciting to talk about, because there's been a lot of lures produced, especially in recent years in Australia. There's been some crazes come out from America and big influencers, and this big bait fishing is definitely one that's taking a lot of the fishing world by storm. Big cod fishing, big flathead, barramundi in the dams, even mangrove jack and jewfish. So I'm going to take you through how I like to fish these things and what I look for when I'm selecting these big swim baits. Look, some of these have been custom designed, and I'm starting to get my hands on a few of these things. I want to share them with you and show you some of the things you can do with these lures, and it might even challenge your lure fishing, because to this point I know I've always gone for smaller baits, and it's only been in the last couple of seasons where I've got the confidence and sometimes the stupidity, because some of these things are ridiculously expensive, to go and get my hands on some of these things and start to fish them. And if I'm really honest with you, the way that it started for me wasn't with the cod fishing. I don't do a lot of cod fishing at the moment. It's one thing that I want to get into a lot more, but it had to do with getting those monster jacks early on and trying to change things up to keep throwing new baits at the jack, so they weren't getting used to the presentations and the type of lures that they were seeing. Oh, in the last probably 2 or 3 years I got into giant flathead fishing, and that was a revelation. I'd always chased flathead as a kid, growing up as a teenager, and fished with really small baits, mostly little soft plastics and diving lures. And it was when I started to upgrade the size of my lures to fish with something, you know, well up over that 10 centimetre, sometimes around the 20 centimetre mark. That's when I started to get bigger catches, and I was weeding out a lot of those smaller school size fish and just getting the giants. So there's a lot in this, and it takes a fair bit of consideration to go diving into the big lure game. I'm going to take you through some of the gear in this video on what I use and probably what you need if you're going to be serious about throwing some of these bigger baits, whether it's for cod, barramundi, or even these big flathead on the flats. And hopefully that'll help you get a start and get your head around, you know, what gear you might need, but also the retrieves and what to look for on the water. Alright, so before we start throwing this and I show you how I like to use it, I just want to give you a really good look at the componentry and some of the detail around these lures. So these are DWC Swimbaits. This obviously is a true swim bait. It's got 2 joins to it, and this one here is a glide bait, which I've only just recently got my hands on. And you can see that he's written JC Special on there, because I've been in contact with David for a while since I saw his swim baits being swum on a Facebook video, and he told me that he makes them custom to some of the requirements that you might be after, and then he gets Gino Customs or GK Customs to paint them up in the kind of designs that you might be after. So these are specifically designed to look like a big whiting in that finish, and I wanted a much bigger profile. I've been fishing with a lot of swim baits and glide baits that were really small, and these big punchy things that look like a big bully mullet or a big mullet profile, I thought maybe for the mangrove jack around pontoons and big docks and things at night, these things might just be able to pull out some giants. And also on the flats where you've got big mullet jumping and landing and spooking around on the flats, I thought maybe a big mullet profile with a clear water presentation and a clear water finish, like this real whiting finish, that might just do the trick. They come with these BKK Raptor Z trebles on them. These things are super strong, ultra sharp. They're probably one of the leaders in the whole treble industry now, I'd say. And they're fantastic. They're like a tournament grade sharpness, but in a super extra heavy duty gauge. And the componentry that goes with it, these rings, the hook hangers you can see there are just really heavy duty. And then the big joint in there is just as strong. So they're built strong, built tough for really big fish. And that's what you're going after, obviously, with something like this. Some of the other features that I really like about this lure, and I spoke to David initially when he was making this, because I got my hands on this swim bait first, and I started to swim it, and then I talked to him about some of the things that I like specifically for flathead. He got on the phone to me, he's like, "What do you like, Johnny?" I said, "I like a tight glide bait like that, and I want something that suspends or very slow floating on the flats." And he said, "Well, I'll make you one that goes slow floating, or you can get one that's a slow sinker around a pontoon, and you can try that for jacks." So that might happen at some stage this season, but this one, really slow suspending, slow floating, big glide bait. I love these big eyes. If you've followed my channel for a long time, you'll know that these big eyes are something that I think is a draw card for big glide baits and big lures to pull fish in. The profile on this, you can just see the size of it. It's got a big chartreuse soft tail, which I think helps with the hookup rate, because when they come in from behind, a big solid tail can just push the bait. So it collapses, and then they can get their face around or their mouth around the back of the bait a bit easier if they come in from behind. I want to show you how it swims, so hopefully I can capture a little bit of footage of this thing, and then I'll talk you through how I like to fish it. Let's get into it. So I want to show you how I'm fishing these things. Now these are a lot bigger than your regular baits, obviously, so you're going to need a little bit bigger gear, and that gives you the chance to be able to hoik these things out a mile and throw and cover a lot of ground on the flats. So obviously just starting off with the right gear is going to put you in the right spot. I'm using a 795 SB. This is a big swim baiting rod. It's nearly 8 foot long. It's matched up. I've got 20-pound line on this thing, which for flathead fishing, that's a lot heavier than you really need, but it's insurance to keep your lure on the end of your line. And then I've got it on a 200 size Shimano Corrado bait caster. Now that longer rod and this bait caster that I'm really used to allows me to get distance casts and get this lure way out there. If you're undergun with the rod size, you've really got to lob your casts. And something like this, it's fairly heavy, it's about 100 grams or something like that, you're really going to struggle. So that's one of the drawbacks of this style of fishing if you go with one of these big glide baits, is that you need that heavier gear. And you really want it because you need to get away from the boat. The big flathead are really wary. You've got to get at least 30 or 40 metres away from the boat often to be able to get onto the fish that haven't seen you. Once the lure is out there and it's a big splash, I'll see if I can show you what it looks like. It's a great big splash that for me is part of the drawing game, drawing these big flathead in, getting their attention. And if you're scared off by that, let me remind you of the size of the splash you see all day long with the mullet just jumping and landing all over the flats anyway. So I think it's actually a trigger to turn the flathead on. And I've caught some great big flathead that have been taken on surface lures and big glide baits as soon as it lands, and I just sit it there and the big flathead just hear it, they come over and grab it. With these I'll fish a little bit heavier just because they're a lot more expensive, and I haven't really found too much of a problem with, I'm on, get stuffed. I'm on, haven't even started using it. It's just sat there on the surface and it's a beast. Oh, it's a beast. So once the lure's out there, all you're wanting to do is try and slowly bring the lure in and give it time to pause. So it should look like just a cruising mullet or a fading whiting. And this slower retrieve bait caster, all I'm doing is just little half turns or full turns with a stall at the end. And that gives it the swimming action that you want. When trying to work it, you really want it like gliding and fading and sitting there. And that's part of the appeal for me with Flathead, is that glide bait style fade. And that's why I fish them a lot more than just regular swim baits. You'll still get Flathead on, you know, big double and triple jointed swim baits, but I just find these a lot easier to work to make them look like a big whiting or a mullet. So that's the retrieve. It's like little stalls all the time, and if you've got a slow floating or a suspending bait like this one, then that's what you'll get. You'll get a perfect suspension, flat like that, just like a mullet or a whiting will sit in the water, and it's going to sit in front of those flathead for a long time. If you've got a really fast sinking swim bait, they're probably better for getting down to cod. You know, you don't really want to be dragging these things through the mud for flathead. I think they're much more appealing as a suspending or slow floating lure. That's the kind of gear that I think is the way to go. You want that heavier line just for insurance, like I said. And then what you're after are these big long casts into these pressure points. So sections where, you know, there's a corner of a mud flat that has a pressure point with water pushing around it that's shallow. You know, if you see birds flying overhead and there's big mullet schools spooking, you want your swim bait or your glide bait to land in amongst or around the edges of those big schools, because that's where a lot of these big flathead hang out. And this is sort of like fish of a lifetime stuff. You're thinking about, you know, 75 and above size flathead. They're not the sort of fish that you're going to be getting every other session. So you've got to be patient with these lures in the moment, you know, cast by cast. It's a test of your patience to leave it in these zones, but it's also a test of your will to see how many sessions you can put in to first find those big fish and then be able to get that strike. Oh, look at that giant, would ya? That is a big flathead taken in about 10 centimetres of water on a Lucky Craft glide bait. Take a look at the beast he faced on this thing. This is a crocodile. I'm going to get the measuring tape out and have a look at this one. Oh my God. One of the things I like about this lure in particular, obviously there's not a lot of them on the market. For one, it's a custom made lure with a custom paint job, and that's the appeal. Like GK will do them up with whatever sort of specs or kind of style that you're looking for, and David can weight them and change them to go, you know, for your needs. So it's not like you're buying a mass-produced swim bait or glide bait off the shelves at one of the big tackle stores. These things, there's not a lot of them, and I really think that's one of the big appeals. So when I'm bringing this thing in, I can see it from ages away. It's got a big broad profile like a mullet, and that means that it really becomes a visual game. And especially when you're learning the technique of throwing and retrieving big baits, you want to be able to see what it looks like in the water so you can get it right. And it's kind of, because of its big profile, it's almost like it's a big locator on top of it. When you're throwing it on the flats, you can see what it's doing a mile away, and it also means you can watch it get punished by those giant flathead. When the big shadow flies off the bottom, the dust storm arrives from the massive flatty, and then your big lure vanishes. That's all part of the brilliant game of chasing these giants. You can see massive big casts over the flats. And look, if you're not convinced of this style of fishing, because soft plastics and small lures are so effective and they catch absolutely everything, this is a different style of fishing that is a real challenge, and it's something I think if you've had a look on Facebook at, you know, the Flathead Fishing Australia page and followed some of the guys in there that are getting a really big fish, or if you've seen my Giant Flathead in the Shallows DVD and you've seen the glide baiting section in there where I go through in a whole heap of detail on how to get onto those bigger fish and show you all that action, there's enough evidence in that, I think, to help get you over the line for your giant flathead fishing and to try this style of fishing. Even just as something new to learn, you know, as part of your fishing game, to learn a new style. Boy, I've enjoyed this style of fishing. And it might not be the, you know, the best way to get numbers, and you know, even big flathead fishing, that's all out for, you know, everyone's debate and discussion on what the most effective style of fishing is. But if you haven't done this style of fishing with glide baits, I think you're leaving a lot on the table. Not just in terms of getting your hands on some bigger fish, but yeah, just enjoying the challenge and the skill set of fishing with these big glide baits. Hopefully I've been able to show you some of the swimming action of this big glide bait, this JC Special by DWC. Boy, they're fantastic to fish with, and very easy to cast, especially if you're fishing with the right kind of gear and you know, you've got the wind behind you. That's a great way to do it across the flats. I love the profile and the swimming action on this, and even though I sort of spoke to David about getting this right, you've always got to test it. And now that I've had it in the water for an hour or so and I'm fishing with this, I'm going to give this a lot more time. I'm convinced it's going to get the job done. If you're worried about how big these baits can get, boy, I've fished with glide baits much bigger than this and pulled beautiful big flathead. Alright, so there they are. These are the DWC custom swim baits. There's a whole lot more. Make sure you check out their Facebook page. And GK does these custom designs and these finishes. He's a talented bloke. You know, one of the best going with these custom lures when they're getting painted up. If you like this review, make sure you leave a comment in the section underneath this video. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And boy, these swim baits that are coming out now, there's a lot to talk about. Lots of lures like this that are coming out, but these ones, given the fact that they're custom, you can get them to suspend or float or slow sink, and these custom paint jobs, these have got a lot to offer. It's a great time to be testing out lures in this lure industry at the moment, especially in Australia. Boy, there's some good stuff coming out. Alright, I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.